So with assessment, obviously there's lots of changes have happened. You know, do you think actually the way that the latest sort of view from government, which is, you know, the assessment purely in teachers' hands are working, do you think it helps teachers, or do you think there needs to be a much more structured approach? And also, sorry, there's 3 questions here. Do you see it changing as well?
Yeah, it's been an interesting few years, hasn't it? And you know, if you look at the hard time, I think that, you know, all educators have had over this time. So, you know, never mind the bubbles bursting and all of that kind of thing. Just the sort of management of predicting grades and the teacher assessed grades, the centre assessed grades. It's really hard, and it's hard for numbers of reasons, which I won't note here, because, you know, anybody who's a teacher will have hundreds of them. But I think it's been important for us as a company to provide consistency across that time for schools, or to try to do that. And so we've tried not to change our goalposts. We've tried to give a consistent baseline for people to base their analysis on. And I personally think that's important. I know there's people out there who would disagree with me, and that's absolutely fine. But we've really considered it carefully, and we've, you know, considered, with all of the changes to the profiling, which has nationally been it's been publicised plenty enough nationally. We've hopefully provided that baseline, and I would imagine that schools have learned a lot about themselves in that time. I think we've gone from, in 2019, obviously entirely reliant on exam outcomes, and have done for decades previous to that. Entirely working to a set of numbers that, you know, a key stage 4 is like almost one number, the progress 8 number. So we've sort of all of our eggs have been in that exam basket, and so the whole of education has, you know, driven towards that. And, you know, I'm being guilty of it myself, is the sort of making sure that you are preparing students to sit an exam paper is some, you know, has been in the past really narrowing, you know, and you think, this is not my subject, I'm teaching you how to answer that question. So I guess with the last 2 years, if you'd seen your kids all the time and you had full reign over your curriculum, probably your shoulders might have gone down a little bit more, and you know, you're kind of teaching around your topic a bit more. But obviously that's other things have conspired. So going forward, I don't know, gosh, there's a huge national debate, isn't there? I mean, 2022 looks like we'll be returning straight back to the exams, with a midway point in terms of how the scores will come out at the end of the day. And then 2023 back to 2019. So it looks that we're just shifting all the way back into that. All of your eggs are in that exam basket at the end of the day. I'm talking, you know, a full exam courses.
Yeah.
And is that right? Is that wrong? Listen, there's a lot of people debating that at the moment. I do think that there's probably been a lot of learning, as I said, gone on in schools over the past 2 years about the accuracy of how you're coming to these predicted grades. But interestingly, from our perspective, when you look at the distribution of grades across schools and across subjects, there's no uniformity to that. You know, the press have been very much like, oh, it's all been elevated and over predictions and everything like that. That's an unfair statement.
Yeah.
Yes, of course, there's been elevation, but it's not in every school. It's not in every subject area. It's not even in 2 key stages the same. So if we were to rely on teacher assessments, I think there'd have to be a lot more guidance given as to how those teacher assessments would absolutely be arrived at, but I don't think that's out with the bounds of the teaching profession. I think we're all capable of doing that with very constructive, clear and timely guidance. But I'm not going to get any more political than that.
I think you're right. I think it's interesting because even if there has been a little bit of elevation in some cases, it's a little bit like, some kids are either good at exams and some kids are bad. They're not very good at sitting down and taking an exam. They're not very good at it. I wasn't very good at it. However, on modular work or on more practical work or whatever it might be, then I was far better at that really as a student. So I think sometimes the elevation might be, well, if they don't have to take the exam, then actually they're going to get this score because actually this is where they are.
I agreed, and we've also got to be very conscious of our different types of groups of young people. So we're conditioned. We have to track any gender gaps, so any gaps between boys, girls, and working in a girls' school all my life. It is girls' attainment in exams tends to be slightly higher or lower down the school. So why is that? And exams are not good for boys, or there's no clear answers, but just sort of giving some of the problems. And then I think I would be remiss not to say that the teaching profession on a whole is probably very concerned over the past 2 years about how that's affected some of our more disadvantaged young people and their access to education, and then going forward for the next couple of years as how their access to back to an examine system might look again. So I think there's lots of different things that you have to consider when you're developing an assessment model, don't you? And teachers able to make judgment calls is just one of them, but it's an important one, but it is just one of them.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, tough times, and I think groups like ASCO are sort of calling for just an entire review of the assessment system in the country, and I don't think that would be a bad thing. I think we must have learned things in the last 2 years that we kind of knew before, but people have actually done them now and have got some experience of it. And, I think it would be a missed opportunity if people were to say, let's just return to what we've done for the last 50 years.
Yeah, no, I think you just nailed it there. I think it's a missed opportunity not to review what we're doing, because you're right. We've been pushed into this. Well, the education system has been pushed, because of COVID and all kinds of things, really into this, into a different way of teaching, a little different way in some ways, different way of assessing. And you sort of go, well, let's at least take the best bits rather than reverting back to the old and just say, well, let's just go back to where we were. Surely we should go, actually, there's some really strong additions that we can add to the education system because of what teachers have been doing up to this point, and leaders as well. I shouldn't,
Sure, but you have to invest. You have to invest in training teachers and making sure that there has to be consistency and fairness for our young people, and therefore you have to train and invest in your teachers properly. But yeah, there's money needed on all sorts of different places in a minute. So yeah, absolutely. It's always difficult, isn't it? In the sense of where we want Utopia to be is probably going to be a lot. It's a little bit further down the line than. Yeah, I think so. It's funny because a couple of years ago, before all this happened, we as a company were invited to a big conference that the Welsh government were holding with their head teachers. And they were looking at that point of just kind of reviewing their whole curriculum, and aspects of that are definitely going through. And I was impressed by the sort of rhetoric coming from the stage for those 2 days, in sense of very much looking at best practice in sort of other countries, Finland and Canada and other places, and looking outward at what sort of good teaching and learning or good assessment as well looks like around the world. And and I was impressed by at least that aspiration. You know, whether the first iteration of it manifests itself in that way, I'd be amazed if it did, because it takes a long time, doesn't it, to invest in your infrastructure and your people, and then, you know, eventually you'll get there in terms of reviewing and evaluating. And but I think the aspiration's definitely there. I almost thought, oh, let me go and move to Wales and take up some teaching in Wales. You know, it was powerful stuff.
Inspiring. Wow.
It was inspiring. That's a good word. Yeah.
Yeah, and actually, do you know, I've worked with the Welsh Assembly a few times, and I agree. I think they are normally quite forward thinking. I don't know if it's because it's quite a new. I know it's been around. I know the Welsh Assembly and the Scottish Assembly have been around for a while, but I wonder if it's because they are newer than the sort of Westminster sort of vibe, as it were. Then there's a bit more of a, what else can we do?
More willing to take risks, maybe. I don't know. But yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, I love working in Wales. I love it. We work with, well, at Key Stage 5, lots of Alps schools in Wales. So most schools in Wales have access to an Alps account. So yeah, I love it. They're just really optimistic people, and kind of not as bogged down, if you like, by that sort of pressure from metrics and pressure from headline measures. Much more open and you know, let's be relaxed. Not relaxed. That makes them sound really, you know, as if they don't care. That's not what I'm saying at all. But it's just a really nice place to work. People smile a lot. It's like going to Scotland.
Absolutely. Well, do you know, I think some of it is about, I think there doesn't feel to be as much accountability. And I mean that in the nicest way, in the sense of, you know, I think schools in England, when Ofsted's about to come around, you know, it does feel like the world is about to, you know, everyone's running around. But Eston seem to have it feels to be a slightly different approach, I think. And so I think the accountability is still there, don't get me wrong, because you've got census, so. All those things. But it feels like it's not something which is, I suppose, almost pressuring a certain level within the school, you know, the leadership team within the school, where they're you know, it's almost a constant worry almost.
Yeah, I mean, I can't talk for Eston, but certainly that's Ofsted is very much sort of this big, you know, looming thing that you kind of go, okay, they're yeah, it's still there. Still here. Yeah, still there.
Don't turn around.
No. And you know, that's always been there, and it's I don't think it's going anywhere. So.
Well, I was talking to Duncan Baldwin, who was in our school before, and he said, you know, I said to him actually at one point, do you think they should have more of the data and so they can make some different decisions? And he said, no, you know, you've got to remember that the government isn't there to make things improve in schools. They're there to make sure there's accountability within schools, and that's what they enforce. They're not there to enforce, you know, different teaching practices or anything. You know, so.
And what I've liked in terms of Ofsted direction in the last few years is the fact that it's less data driven, entirely less data driven, you know, from where it was, you know, 15, 20 years ago. And what that means is that you don't have to have the folders and folders of data sitting on your desk waiting for Ofsted to come in. They come in armed with the data they come in with, and, you know, you then say, okay, here's my evidence to support my judgment or whatever. And I think it sounds crazy coming from somebody who's from an EdTech data platform, but really honestly, you know, you need key bits of data across the year. Of course you do. And so Ofsted are not saying that you don't need data, but you just need key data. So you can drown people in data, as you know, and, you know, data can tell you all sorts of things. If it's the wrong data, you need smart data, you need accurate and reliable data that you can then ask, so what from? That's hopefully how people are using a platform like ours. Is that at key points they're saying to their staff, okay, how are you assessing these students now? And therefore, what is that telling me about what we need to do next? Which is, it might be you need to go and look at your learning and teaching, or I need to look at what resources you need, or we need to look at a whole school program on literacy or numeracy or whatever. Key data at key times will tell you that. Too much data, and you won't see that, because you'll have your head in blinking Excel files all the time, or on platforms like Connect. You're not really getting to the nub of what it is that you need to do to answer that. So what am I going to do to make a difference here?
No, it makes perfect sense. Again, it comes back to, you almost want for some people who don't necessarily like looking at data, you almost want it to say, do the so what almost for them as well in the future, don't you? You almost want it to get to the point where it goes, I'm going to take you on the journey of the so what's, to the point of then all you have to do is just basically work out how to solve that problem, rather than trawl through the data. If you say, the more data, then worse it becomes.
Yeah, so, and I hope that's what certainly schools who use Connect have said, is that the answering the so what is quite straightforward for a classroom teacher. Okay, so what? Okay, so what? Your students who should be getting B grades are not getting them. And that's what's dragging the whole number thing down. So therefore, can you, for the next month, go, focus on B grade answers and model B grade answers, or teach the B grade stuff differently, or whatever. So you've got a real key thing to go, okay, yeah, I understand that. I understand what I've got to do next. And you can go and do it. Whereas if there's way too much data swirling around, and you're sort of saying, well, but you told me this, and now you're telling me that. So that I think that's really important. And I think teachers like the Connect platform for that reason. It's giving them very simple messages quickly, and then they can come out of it. Go focus on your lesson plan.
Yeah, amazing.
Which is important.